for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host, Ian Gibson. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing good. Still recovering from a really insane Saturday.
I mean, not only insane Saturday, but that Friday game was ridiculous, and we'll get into it. But just a tremendous weekend of college football. I didn't get to watch a ton of it because I was working yesterday, which is good. But I did watch all of the recaps of all the games. So I watched almost all of it, except for like maybe one or two of them. But, you know, just a great day of college football, a lot going on, very close games, even ones that like the final score looked like it was a little bit of a big lead for one team. It was still close throughout most of these games, and really only like a small amount of blowouts per se.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really like competitive day from top to bottom. But let's get into it. The first game we're going to talk about is the game from Friday, Virginia Tech, Miami. And I thought I had something in the Wednesday show talking about that game was possibly a upset like special, like because it was just, I don't know, I couldn't find it. It might be in there somewhere, but I'd have to dive deeper into the episode to be able to find it. But you know, it's one of those games where it's like it's an odd night. It's not like a Saturday, it's like a Friday or Thursday game, and you know, the other team is like a big underdog, and you know, the other team, you know, the favorites, like not really thinking too much of it. And that honestly seemed like what happened. But I will say this Va-Tech team came to play, and they put forth a huge effort, and they honestly, I felt like they deserved to win the game because they were the better team throughout almost 90% of the game, outside of the moments where Miami was up like 14-7, I believe. I mean, just Cam Ward had a great game, but he had a lot of mistakes, which he's done in the past, which he's had several turnovers when he was at Washington State. And he had 2 picks here in this game, one really bad in the red zone that could have led to points, but somehow didn't for Va-Tech. And then, you know, a fumbled loss that led to a quick score right at the beginning of the game. So, you know, Va-Tech had their chances. They were up at 1.10 with a short distance to go for a 4th down. They went for a fake field goal. If they had converted there and gotten that 1st down, they had a chance to go up 3 scores, which I think at that point in the 3rd quarter, it was late in the 3rd quarter, if they had gone up 3 scores, I almost believe they probably would have won. And I think that's why the coach went for it, because he knew a field goal only kept it 2 scores. If they got that 3rd score, it might have been the nail in the coffin for Miami, considering how good Va-Tech's offense had been playing all game. You know, Miami's defense does not look that good. They were very average at best the entire game. Drones had several plays. If there were broken plays, he had huge runs, had really, a really good game passing the ball. You know, this Miami team is really good on offense, like we said the other day, but they're kind of suspect on defense. And if they play better teams, you know, they're going to get challenged. And, you know, they may make the playoff just because the ACC is so weak, but that doesn't mean that they're guaranteed anything in the playoffs. So it could be a short run. You know, Cam Ward is still very good. You know, if they keep winning, he has a really good chance of winning the Heisman. But at this point, if they lose a couple of games, he's going to be out of it. So, Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I know I texted you, and I said this to everybody. This was as close as a wake-up call as you were going to get for a season. I said, if this is either a wake-up call or a canary in the cave, because this was, I said Wednesday, the toughest team Miami has played so far this year. Their schedule was very light going in, and give them credit, they blew those teams out of the water as they should. But then they go play Vodtech, and it was clear as day they slept on this team. And it's not only the fact that they went for not even converting that fourth down. If they just kick the field goal, it's a 1-point game on that final drive. And instead of throwing a Hail Mary and having that controversial ending, you just need to kick a field goal and you win the game. So Miami is very, very fortunate. They played undisciplined. They were unfocused, sloppy. They definitely did not look like a top 10 team in the country, especially to a Vodtech team that's kind of been reeling lately. Miami should have handled them. I did say this. I remember seeing the spread was 17. And I was like, well, Vodtech will do that, but it shouldn't have been anywhere this close. Miami should not have been down 34-24 late into the third quarter. That should not have happened. Man, the 3 turnovers were, you can't have that happen. On the other side, I did want to say that final drive was some of the most brutal clock management I have ever seen in my time watching college football. Brent Pry, the head coach at Vodtech, I don't know what I think they had 3 or 2 timeouts.
They had 3. It was confusion on ESPN's part because ESPN had it at 2. Trust me, I was confused as well. I was like, why aren't they using timeouts or whatever? It seemed very strange, like how he was managing it. And it also, because we didn't know as an audience how many timeouts they had. So it was very bizarre.
Regardless, they had the first down and the guy was in bounds. That's where you need to call time because that saved them about 20 more seconds.
Right.
So instead of having to throw 2 straight Hail Marys, you nickel and dime it, you get it to maybe within the 20, 25-yard line or closer, and you're in a better shape. So that was really the killer, was not only not taking the points and I'll give them credit. At least they were playing aggressive. They were going for the dagger. But again, think about it. They kicked that field goal. It's a 1-point game, and you got to kick a field goal to win the game instead of a Hail Mary. But Miami.
Well, you could also argue at the end of the half when they kicked that field goal with 25 seconds left, and they squib kicked it to Miami, and Miami ran it to the 50 and got a field goal out of it. If they don't squib kick it there and just kick it out of the end zone, that's right there is the difference than what you're talking about, because that actually could have been something they could have done is prevented them from scoring that field goal at the end of the half, which they clearly should have done. That honestly was even bigger than I think the 4th down play, because they had the opportunity to prevent that and they didn't. And I was so like mystified by why that was happening. I'm like, why are you squib kicking here? Like you squib kick with like 7 seconds left. You don't squib kick with 25 seconds. There's way too much time there. Like, I don't know.
Regardless, Miami's very fortunate in this one. They got lucky, just straight up. Call or not, they got very lucky. And they cannot be playing like that for the rest of the year because they will be less fortunate the next time around.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about the catch yet. And it was, on the broadcast, both announcers said that they felt like it was inconclusive. The Matt Austin, the rules analyst that used to be a ref, said he felt like it was inconclusive. He felt like it was incomplete, but he felt like it was inconclusive. Those were 3 people saying that on the broadcast. And I know it's like whatever, but the review took like 5 minutes. And, what they ended up saying on Saturday morning was that they felt that it was incomplete because the defensive player touched the ball as he was coming to the ground, and because he was out of bounds, that makes it incomplete. So, it is what it is. Like, it obviously was close. They called it a touchdown on the field because from their vantage point, they probably saw him grab it, and then they couldn't tell if he held it on the ground or not, and if it just got knocked away like shortly after he was on the ground. It's very inconclusive. And that's all I'm going to say. I think that if anything from that replay is that it is inconclusive and that whatever the call in the field should have stood, and whatever, this is what the ACC said, so there's not much you can do. I actually was watching the condensed game, so almost every play on the recap, and they didn't even show the play in controversy. They just showed the ref saying it was overturned because the ACC doesn't even want you to be able to see the play anymore because it's that controversial. Your thoughts on it before we move on?
The only thing, and I know I said to you, I didn't even think it was a catch. So it was technically, in a roundabout way, they made the right call. It just, they had to do it the hard way because that ball was moving too much for me to say, like, I can't say that's a catch because it should have been called incomplete, first of all, in my opinion. And then it was overturned. I wasn't as again, I was just more annoyed of like, why did you got to take the long way like in this? You could have just said it was incomplete because that ball was clearly moving more than it should for it to look like a catch.
Yeah, and if it was incomplete on the field, the call on the field, then it would not have been overturned. Like it would have been inconclusive as well. So like it was inconclusive regardless. So really, honestly, it felt like whatever the call on the field was going to be, it should have stood. And it's bizarre to me that they overturned it when it's supposed to be conclusive as evidence to overturn. But let's move on. Kentucky, Ole Miss. Upset of the day. Like Ole Miss is like playing for a potential playoff spot, and they just laid an egg against Kentucky. And Kentucky's defense is good. They stifled Georgia, which obviously even Alabama could even stifle. So Kentucky wins this game. It was a late score. It's amazing that they even had this opportunity because it felt like Ole Miss had the advantage and was going to win this game. And then Kentucky gets that late drive and scores a touchdown. And it's just, it's just amazing to me that Kentucky won this game. But Kentucky has played Ole Miss relatively close the last couple of years. So, hats off to them for really having Lane's number a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this team as far as Ole Miss because their schedule is really soft outside of like a game or two. And this was not one of the games that anyone really was worried about. So for them to lose this game is not good for their playoff chances. They could probably lose another game and still get in, but it's going to be more difficult with a loss like this to Kentucky. Your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, and very similar to Miami game. I expected Ole Miss again. I just expected them to match up to their opponent better, and they just straight up, like you said, laid an egg. And this time they weren't lucky. They were playing, very weak teams. We noted that their schedule wasn't as strong, and I even said that Wednesday. But I expected, there wasn't enough like alarm in that schedule that I was like, okay, they're going to find a way to figure out this Kentucky defense. But give Kentucky credit. Their coverages really confused Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart didn't have a terrible game. He threw for over, I think, 250 yards, and I think he had a touchdown.
Yeah.
But what they really did was cut down the ground game, and they made Ole Miss one-dimensional. I know Lane Kiffin, it's the passing game is the show, but having the run game complement has been something that's a staple for Ole Miss. And Kentucky did a very good job to making Ole Miss one-dimensional. For Kentucky, they were playing keep away. Obviously the new Ole Miss's strength was on offense. So the best thing you do, keep the ball away from them. So they ran it, and we saw Brock Vandagriff. That was the Brock Vandagriff we were expecting as the big transfer from Georgia. That's who I was waiting to see this year. I know he had over 200 yards and a touchdown as well. But when it came down to it, just Kentucky seemed like they wanted it more. Ole Miss was kind of sleepwalking in, and it's one of those games where you look at it and I'm like, do they expect to just like fall up and do a win? And it didn't happen. So it's a really tough loss because I think they play again. If Ole Miss plays more focused, they win that game. But Kentucky jumped on them. And we know as Gator fans, You give Kentucky a chance, they're going to win. Like, you give them any chance, they will win that game. So you can't do that. You can't give them any hope.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the team stats, and Kentucky had the ball for like 40 minutes compared to Ole Miss having it for 20, and then Ole Miss only had 14 first downs and 56 total plays, and then on third down they were 1 of 10.
Yeah.
Like if you're going 10% on third down, that is not a good look.
Yeah.
Okay. Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Kansas State stomps Oklahoma State. And I actually kind of saw this coming because Kansas State is one of the better, like probably the best team in the Big 12. And I think Oklahoma State is like, I don't know. Bowman just does not impress me. He's like, I mean, he put up good numbers, but he also had 2 interceptions, and like they never really were in contention in this game, so they had to throw almost the entire time to catch back up. And Avery Johnson looks really good. He had a pick, but he had 300 yards total and 5 TDs. The kid is really fast, really athletic. He runs the RPO really well. His passing game is getting better each game. This was a huge test for them. They have in their upcoming schedule, they got West Virginia, Colorado, Kansas, and Iowa State at the end of the year. So if they can get through the Colorado, West Virginia, and Kansas games like 2-1, which is possible, they honestly, I feel like they would probably be in the Big 12 championship game with a really good shot at getting into the playoffs. So, well, yeah, if they win the playoff, the conference championship, they would. But they have a really good shot here. So this team is good defensively. They're solid. Outside their loss to BYU, which Ian, you didn't get to talk about it last week, but it was a bit of a fluky game. There was like a punt return for a touchdown, a fumble return for a touchdown. So there was like a lot of like non-offensive scores for BYU. So like maybe that's more of like a misnomer or like a fool's gold type game where it's not really indicative of who Kansas State really is. So I think this game was more impactful and it resonates. I think Kansas State going forward can take this and really, build upon this. But what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree. And what I saw with K-State was this was as best of a statement they have had for this year. Because, yeah, they had the BYU game and they didn't look good. But you go play OK State and you just dominate them on not only passing. Avery Johnson had a fantastic game. He has the best release, like quickest, most clean release of any quarterback in the country. And he carved them up. Great route running. He can also run the ball if he needs to. He's a Swiss Army knife of a quarterback. Yeah. But
he's awesome.
Not only can you win it with Johnson, but with the rushing attack, I know Gideon's had over almost 200 yards rushing as well. And with that, there's nothing Oklahoma State could do to stop them. The one thing I do want to note, though, is that while K-State blew out Oklahoma State, they did almost give up 500 yards against Oklahoma State. And that is something defensively that, they gave up 38 to BYU. So in conference play, they have not looked very strong.
Well, they held Arizona to 7.
Arizona, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Arizona's in the Big 12. Yeah. Okay, so out of 3 conference games, okay, that was, it's something, regardless, they're going to have to really focus on, because offensively they have looked fantastic with the exception of the BYU game. But defensively, we can go back to the Tulane game, BYU, and even Oklahoma State, even though they blew them out, giving up over 500 yards, that's something that needs to be focused if they want to take that next step through the year. But all in all, very good game all around. They, took advantage of the turnovers and they stuffed Oklahoma State and made them, again, one-dimensional. And there was no answer for K-State.
Yeah, and can you imagine Kansas State having a home playoff game?
Yeah.
With it being like freezing cold and because they run the ball so well, like, they honestly, I think anyone that they would play in a home playoff game have to be like, pooping their pants, because it's going to be a difficult matchup to try to take down a team that, especially if it's like either like a Southern Cal or like a Southern team, like I don't know, Georgia, or somebody that, like, is on the fringe of getting in the playoff, and then they get into a playoff game and it's like, oh, you got to go to Kansas State and freeze your butt off. So we'll see. Okay, moving on. I didn't get to watch this game live, and
Lucky you.
Yeah, and what sucks is that the American doesn't have the best highlight packages, and ESPN doesn't treat them that well with a good like recap. So it's like, unless I record the game, which I should have, and I didn't, but I didn't get to watch like every play, so I don't know truly how this game went. I know you watched it, Ian, but I'm just going to say my piece. Clearly, Tulane is a better team than USF right now. They've been the better team for the last like 4 years. And I will just say, I'm not like as downtrodden as like 90% of the USF fans online are, because they were basically ready to jump off a cliff because they felt like this was, they were comparing it to Jeff Scott, and I'm just like, come on, man. Like, this is not the same thing. Jeff Scott was so inept. Like, Alex Golish is a way better coach than him, and to even compare him to him is insulting. Like, Jeff Scott won 4 games in 3 years, and Alex Golish won 7 games in 1 year last year. Like, yes, all the difficult games are in the front load of the schedule, so it looks a lot worse than it actually is. Like, yeah, you can't, like, I'm sorry, but Alabama and Miami are 2 of the top 10 teams in the country. Tulane is vying for the conference championship, and it was a terrible game. Defensively, they couldn't do anything, and then when they started moving the ball, they turned it over too much, and just basically the game was over. So, like, it was just a terrible game front to back. They played well enough in the Alabama and Miami games to be in those games into the third and fourth quarter, but this was completely different. They were never really in the game. They were down 30-0 or 31-0 almost right away, and it was over by halftime. And it's a shame because Byram got hurt, and we don't know if he's out or what as of right now. We'll probably find out by the Wednesday show, but it doesn't look good. And you know what you have to just do? You have to just forget it, because you know what? Next week is Memphis, and you have a chance to win a conference game, which you haven't done yet. And so you got to keep winning conference games if you want a chance at winning the conference. This is not over. Like, the team is definitely good enough to contend for a championship in the conference. So they just have to forget this game. It stinks, but it's not the end of the world. What's your thoughts, Ian?
So 2 things about this game that sprung up to me. One is that there was a lot of discussion if like Tulane was going to drop off, or, are they still going to be at the top of the AAC or even in the group of 5? How good are they? And they made an emphatic statement that, no, they're still the best. I would, out of the group of 5s, like, it's them and probably like Boise State that are.
Oh, Boise State looks real good with their running back, Genty or whatever his name is. Oh, the kid's getting Heisman hype.
Exactly. But so those are like the 2, like Tulane's at the top of the pyramid right now. And they proved that this game. Like, again, new coach, a lot of guys leaving and all that. And we kind of expected there to be a drop off. It has literally been the same Tulane team. Their 2 losses have been to Oklahoma. And even then, they weren't like totally out of it. I mean, they put up a good fight in K-State, which they could have won that game. So, and then, they blew out UL Lafayette. They blew out, I think it was Southeast Louisiana. D2 team, and then they make a statement against USF.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this is for USF, this isn't the alarm, but this is like the first bell ringing. I'm not saying it's time to panic with this coaching staff and all that, but you need to show improvement with year 2.
Yeah.
Year 1 was great. It's great to win games that teams are better at finally.
Yeah.
But now you have to start competing. And I get, look, yeah, we were fighting with Bama and you're fighting with Miami, but Tulane's a team you're going to have to play regardless. So that game was, in my opinion, more important than whatever was going to happen with Bama and Miami. Because guess what?
100%.
Those wins don't, if somehow they beat Bama and Miami, those don't matter for your chance at a conference championship. They look great, but it doesn't matter. So Tulane was the one where I was like, this I want to see. And man, once Byram was out, it was pretty much over. But even the game was gone after that. The defense has not improved so far that we have seen this year, at least not enough to stop at a rushing attack like Tulane. Tulane just gashed them every play. I remember the first half, I think I counted maybe 2 plays that didn't go more than 5 yards for Tulane on offense. It was defensively, it has been an absolute nightmare so far. And that's what I'm saying. And offensively, the passing game still is not in sync. And you got to like try something here. You got to try something different because what you are doing is not working, just straight up. And this is what I'm saying, where it's kind of a bit of a bell is we need to see improvements. You see year 2, like I said, year 1 is a great story. And it's fantastic that we beat those teams that we are better at. But now you have to get better. You can't just continually feast on the bottom feeders of the AAC if you really want to start fighting for conference championships. And Tulane is your juggernaut. That's your final boss right there. Because whether you like it or not, you're going to have to play them in the conference championship. You're either going to have to play Tulane or Memphis in the conference championship. So how they respond against Memphis, and I know we'll probably talk about it more on Wednesday, that is going to be really telling. Because you literally got punched in the mouth, got put back in your place against a team that played better, coached better, and just showed that you're nowhere near their level yet. So you need to show, like I said, you need to start showing improvement, not only for Memphis, but for the rest of the year. You have got to tighten the ship now. So it's really like kind of like a fire in your pants kind of moment for USF. You can't keep coasting right now. You have to start winning and you have to be performing at a better level because, like I said, last year isn't good enough anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it last year is it, and like now we're, like you said, it needs to get better. It really does, and it's a shame that I just wish this Tulane game wasn't so early in the season. I wish that there had been like another conference game or two in between these two. I don't even know why the AAC as like their scheduler, why wouldn't they put these 2 games later in the year? Like they know that USF, Memphis, and Tulane are the best teams in the conference. Why not? Like, because they had the choice. They could have pushed these games later, but they decided to put them early. I don't know what they like, because if like USF's like 7-2 coming into the Tulane game, like there's a lot on the line at that point, and maybe it's more amped up, and there's like, USF gets more out of that game than this early in the season, and they just falter because it's like whatever, and they've lost 2 games and they're kind of beat up right now. But I don't know. Let's move on to USC and Wisconsin. It's funny because like every fan base is the same, because now I'm like, I've got more USC followers, so I'll see more of their tweets than I have in years past. And like, considering how volatile everyone is as a fan during games, and they're just as volatile as any other fan base, because Wisconsin goes up 21-10, and like the USC fans are like freaking out and like, oh, the season's over and we need a new OC and all this. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, Wisconsin's not that good. And, like, they were getting those points due to some fortunate bounces and turnovers that gave them the opportunity to be able to be up 21-10. And then it was like once Miller Moss got going, and not only Moss but Lane by the wide receiver for USC. I mean, they just kept going and like making huge play after play. Moss, I'm telling you, man, he looks really good. And I would think that out of his 2 games that he's played right now, and technically, well, 3 games with the Michigan game as well, I think he's played the best schedule so far out of anybody in the country. And because I don't think anyone else has played 3 really good opponents. LSU, obviously, top 15, Michigan in the top 20, and Wisconsin is solid, but not that great. But still, like, those 3 opponents are probably better than anyone else has played. And he has looked amazing in every one of these games, like over 300 yards almost every game. He had 3 TDs in this game. Very underrated Heisman campaign right now. If they keep winning, it'll really elevate as we go on. They have the Penn State game coming up. So there's a lot to look forward to with this USC team. They had a great game, 469 total yards, 29 first downs, had 82 total plays. They were over 50% on third down, converted both fourth downs, and they just honestly, outside of the turnovers that they had, they were the better team, like almost the entire game, except for the moments that they gave those opportunities to Wisconsin. So, huge first Big Ten win for them. They'll move forward here, and like I said, their schedule, outside of the Penn State and Notre Dame games, is not too crazy difficult. The Nebraska game is probably the most difficult game outside of those 2. So they play Minnesota in Minnesota next week, and then they have Penn State after that. So we'll see. They're going to get tested, and I am going to try to go to this Penn State game. I know I keep saying I'm trying to go to these USC games, and I'm failing miserably at it, but I'm going to make the most of it and try to make sure I go, because I want to get some coverage and get us some nice B-roll and some stuff for videos, and especially the end of year stuff. But Ian, your thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is with Miller Moss, when he's on, in terms of passing, he's the best quarterback in the country. And the only other one I could say that is as good in terms of ball placement would probably be Cam Ward right now.
Yeah.
But Miller Moss, like the one touchdown, I think it was USC's first touchdown, the ball placement and his arm strength, it's very like when he knows where to go, it's almost like he can put it wherever he wants. And
and it's unstoppable. It's almost like undefendable.
Yeah, the only thing with Moss he needs to work on, and we saw it this game, we definitely saw it the Michigan game, is being able to see the coverages and the ones where they're like baiting you into throwing that. We saw that with the pick 6 last week and this interception, this one. But besides that, and when that's not in the cards and he can see a guy going down a streak and he's like, oh, single coverage, my guy's got him by a half a step, I'm just going to put the ball maybe a yard or 2 in front and make sure he is the only one to catch it. And that's the thing. He hasn't thrown a pass where the only interceptions he's thrown is where he got fooled by the defensive coverage. He has not thrown a pass to where it was risky and that the defense could have also gotten it. It was either his guy gets it or nobody gets it. And that is insane to see. So it's when he starts clicking. USC, again, they got to stop with these slow starts. They had a slow start and they paid the price against Michigan, and they had a slow start, but luckily we're able to, kick it in gear against Wisconsin. But I always say you can't keep doing that. You cannot keep doing that for the rest of the year. So hopefully that's a bug they can fix. And that's something they're going to have to address. Plus the 3 turnovers on offense.
Yeah.
That is something going forward they are going to have to fix if they really, are going to have to keep winning these big games.
Yeah, and they outscore Wisconsin 28-0 in the second half. So obviously, halftime adjustments have been a huge thing for Lincoln Riley. So they've been able to make the needed changes to and tweaks and find the weaknesses in between the two halves. So we'll see. Obviously, the mistakes, like you said, the turnovers need to be dealt with, but I like their chances the rest of the way. Even if they lose another game, I still think they're going to get into the playoff. So let's move on to Louisville and Notre Dame. This was a really close game, and Louisville had a chance at the end to make a play and just couldn't do it. And hats off to Louisville and Shuck. The kid is solid. I'm even more impressed with him now than I have ever been in his whole career. And maybe he's playing his way into an NFL draft pick. You never know. And it's funny because it's like if they don't fumble in the beginning of the game, because Shuck had a huge run, fumbles the ball, Notre Dame picks it up, they get a score off of it. They fumbled the ball off of a punt. They led to 2 Notre Dame scores. Notre Dame returned the favor, fumbled, lost, and led to a Louisville score. The score was 21-14. And did you see that catch?
Yes.
Oh my, we've seen a lot of great catches in the last couple of days, but that one was like unreal, man. Dude, if you get a chance, type in Louisville, Notre Dame. Anyone that's watching is Louisville, Notre Dame, awesome catch. And it's like, dude, it is ridiculous. But, like I said, when I said the other day, this game was basically Notre Dame's playoff opportunity. If they didn't win this game, they were not going to make the playoffs, and they had to win this game. And I think they even showed on ESPN that like the percentage of likelihood getting to the playoff by each team was so high depending on who won. So like whoever won would have like a way, like I think it was like 30 or 40% higher if they won to see who would actually get it. So it's like it depended a lot. And I knew that Notre Dame was going to put everything into this game to try to win it. And they did. They came out, they made the plays. Riley Leonard looked pretty good. This Notre Dame team is pretty legit. And, I feel like, if they have a playoff game, because they're not a conference winner, because they're not in a conference. So they're not going to be a first round bye. So that means the highest they can get is the 5th seed. And so that means likelihood there'll be a home playoff game. And if that's the case in the freezing cold, it favors them. So like Notre Dame has a real opportunity to do something here, at least get to the quarterfinals. And then who knows from there. And, I like the rest of their schedule. It's pretty soft outside of USC, and I think they can lose that game and they can still get in. So, a lot of opportunity here for Notre Dame. Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, the difference between this one, because Louisville just straight up, if you look at the stats, outplayed Notre Dame. They beat them on time of possession, total yards, and it was a 1-score game. Notre Dame jumped out early, but Louisville kept coming in and kept coming back. The difference was that even though they both had 2 turnovers, Notre Dame was the one who converted and Louisville did not. And that is what really sunk Louisville, is that those 2 turnovers gave Notre Dame those scores. And that was honestly the nail in the coffin for Louisville, because they were playing catch up the whole game. And it's no matter how well you play, if you're playing catch up, it doesn't doesn't look good if you're not, winning on the scoreboard. So that's ultimately the story of the game, was that capitalizing on turnovers Notre Dame was able to take advantage of it, and they were able to, run out of South Bend with it.
Yeah, I mean, they had a decent lead of 21-7. So, when you can start off the game with that good of a advantage, you're more than likely going to win a game. So, getting ahead early and getting a nice lead propelled them further into the game. And credit to Louisville for staying in the game, but yeah, and it's not over for Louisville. Like we talked about Notre Dame's chances. I think Louisville still has an opportunity. This is not an ACC game, so they're still, undefeated in ACC play. So we'll see where they go from here. They play Miami, Clemson, and we've talked about that before. So they've got to go at least 1-1 in those games to have a shot to get to the ACC championship game. Okay, this was a good game. Arkansas, Texas A&M. I didn't realize how close it was till I saw the score later, and I was like, wow, A&M squeaked this one out, and it was back and forth. I really like this Taylon Green. He's very solid. He's got a nice deep ball. I think he'll only get better as he goes on. For Texas A&M, Le'Veon Moss had a really good game. He was definitely running the ball very well. And, A&M, lost to Notre Dame, but now they haven't lost since. And I know they haven't looked impressive in a lot of these games, but an SEC win is an SEC win. And their schedule is not crazy difficult because they have Missouri, LSU, and Texas, and the rest of them are pretty easy. So if they win at least one of those games, they more than likely have an outside chance of getting into the playoffs. So, and maybe if they win two of them, because I could see them beating Missouri. I don't know if they'll beat LSU, and they're definitely not beating Texas, but I can see them beating Missouri and maybe having an outside shot at LSU. But who knows? Anything is up for grabs right now with them. But your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, really what it came down to in this one was Arkansas committed 3 turnovers in that last fumble at the end, and I've been saying it for years. You cannot, turnovers are the bane of a team's existence on offense, because not only, obviously you're giving the ball up, but you're running out of time to score and come back. Especially, obviously the fumble at the end was the killer, but the other 2 turnovers were just the worst time for them, because that just takes away any opportunity you got to score. And when it came down to the fourth quarter and crunch time, A&M was able to make those big plays where Arkansas couldn't, and we've seen that with Arkansas this season. They just can't get that one game-breaking play to go their way, but A&M was able to get it on their side, and defensively, A&M really did a good job getting to Green as well as he played. They made sure that it wasn't going to be any big, plays that would kill them.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Colorado, UCF, or Mid Florida, as I like to call them. I am grateful that Colorado won this game, because I love it anytime that Mid Florida loses a game. And it is nice, because if they were undefeated coming into the Florida game next week, they'd probably be, high as a kite and, ripping people and whatnot on Twitter. But it's nice to take them down a peg, because they got blown out here. This game was honestly never really even close. It really wasn't. And UCF put up a lot of yards, but didn't really threaten Colorado that much. UCF had 4 turnovers, and again, like you said, turnovers are huge. And not only did they have 4 turnovers, they had 2 turnovers on downs on 4th down. So they technically had 6 turnovers. One of them was near the end of the game, but still, that's 5 in regular time of the game outside of garbage time. And you're not going to win many games turning the ball over 5 times, giving field position to the other team. But Ian, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, if you want kind of a microcosm of the game that went for UCF, look no further than the first drive, literally the first 5 minutes of the game. They forced Sanders to throw an interception, and they have great field position, and they are literally on the doorstep of the goal line, 3rd and goal. I think it was at the 3-yard line, and they lollipop it, and it gets picked, and no points off that drive. And UCF actually outgained Colorado in this game. They almost got 500 yards. But those 4 turnovers were so brutal. Again, turnovers will kill you, and that absolutely is what happened. And Colorado had, Sanders as mobile as he is, and as well, just straight up how much better the receivers were for UCF. It didn't matter how much time Sanders had in the pocket. They were, just, going to do whatever they wanted because they were able to burn him deep. So in the end, Colorado just showed that they were the better team. They had, were able to take advantage of the situation better than UCF did.
Yeah, and Shedeur Sanders is very good, and Travis Hunter had a great game, another touchdown and interception game, which is I think very rare as far as the last 20, 30 years for anyone that's even done those 2 things. And he's done it in 3 games. So, which is ridiculous. And he should be up there in the Heisman race. I will say though, that those wide receivers that are freshmen, Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, by the end of the year, they really need to be talked about Heisman wise, because they're putting up scary big numbers. And I know Hunter is good on both sides, but he's not putting up crazy numbers as a receiver. So that's where I'm kind of I don't know. I would rather have a player that puts up huge numbers on offense. And I think that's just guaranteed. It's usually what the Heisman voters are looking for anyways. So it's likely that one of those, I don't know, you'll see an offensive player more than likely win it again, because that's usually who wins it anyways. Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
Just Colorado, came to town.
Yeah. And like I said, their schedule gets tougher the rest of the year. They play Utah, they play Kansas State, I believe, and they play who else do they play? Yeah, they play Kansas State next, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas. So there's at least 3-4 more losses for Colorado. Okay, moving on. This game was surprising because Mississippi State kept it a 1-score game into halftime, but Texas ends up running away with it at the end, 35-13. But the funny thing is, Florida actually looked better score-wise than Texas did. I mean, Mississippi State scored less, but still Florida ended up scoring more than Texas did. And, it is kind of, you would think it would happen because Arch Manning is just learning the offense. But Arch Manning had a really great game. He had 3 TDs and 324 yards. So I think it's also the offense isn't as smooth yet because Arch is a first time starting these games. So once he gets in the flow of games a little more, it'll be a little bit smoother, and they'll start beating the crap out of teams again. But close game, Texas wins. Their schedule is going to get a lot more difficult. They play Georgia, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt will be a tough game. Kentucky, Arkansas, Texas A&M. So this is a bit of a gauntlet for Texas the rest of the way, because they had a real easy schedule outside that Michigan game. But now the rest of it is really good teams outside of Florida. But your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, and this is honestly, if you're a head coach, this is the best problem to have, is because I think there is a legitimate decision to make of whether you stick with the hot hand of Manning or you give it back to yours. But it's a good problem to have because Manning has looked pretty good. And I get his starts have been against weaker teams, but he's been cool in the pocket. He hasn't tried to rush anything. He's looked great, and he looks great in this one. Now, it was funny, after the second half, it was almost like Texas realized, oh yeah, we're better than this team. And they just started to pull away from them. And that was more of an attrition thing. Texas just was showing up and was finally like, okay, we've got enough distance. We can pull away from this one. And Mississippi State, they give them credit. They were able to keep it close, but they were just outmanned and they didn't have enough to keep up in this one. And that's what it came down to. Usually when you have better players, when it comes down to the late of the game, that's where it shows. And Texas had the better players.
Yeah. And, I feel like, this Texas team is definitely destined to do a lot of really good things the rest of the year. So, they were more than likely going to win this game regardless. But Mississippi State came to play, though. Okay, let's move on to the next game is. Oh, shit. Hold on a second.
Yep.
Okay. The next game is Georgia, Alabama. Woo! What a game.
Yeah.
Damn, what a game. I didn't get to watch a single second really live because I was working, but watch the full recap and man, what a back and forth game. Just like, one team is funny. Alabama was like throttling Georgia. And then all of a sudden, after halftime, Georgia just coming back. And Beck had a really bad game, like overall, you can say, but he still played very well in the same aspect. So it's like he made a ton of mistakes, but at the same time, he kept them in this game. And it's like, if it weren't for him, they probably would have lost this game by like 30 points. But they ended up coming back, getting the lead late. And then Ryan Williams with just a amazing play. This kid is 17 years old, should be in high school, and just, dude, it was ridiculous. And he just looks so good. This Ryan Williams, I'm telling you, man, he's going to be the next huge wide receiver in the NFL. And kid is really good. And Jalen Milroe, what can I say? That's another guy, Heisman-wise. Milroe looks really good, and he was hitting some amazing throws and just, it was everything you could have asked for and more in a top 5 matchup. It was probably one of the best games in the last 5 years. And this this was great. I loved every second of it. And, I'm grateful for these games. And, Georgia's season's not over by far at all, but it still was great to see them slug it out. Your thoughts, Ian?
So as good as it was, I know I was texting you, I was texting my cousin George, I was texting a lot of people through this game. This was you want to talk about a tale of two halves for both teams? This is the prime example. I came out, nothing really changed with my assessment though, with both these teams. Now, Bama had a chance to, and you could say, yes, they did make a statement, but I'm reading between the lines of it and watching this game, and I might get flack for it, but after that second half, I was like, regardless, when Georgia took that lead, I said, regardless of how this ends, I know I texted just straight up something different to you. Yeah. But I know I texted my cousin George, regardless of how this game is, Bama does not deserve to win this game after that. Because here was my thing. I was seeing the difference in real time between a good coach right now in DeBoer and a great coach in Kirby Smart. Because I guarantee you, and I said this, if Saban was on that sideline still, this game, no chance Georgia even makes it close. But what happened was, and you clearly saw it, when Georgia adjusted, Bama just stood in the quicksand. And they are very, very, very fortunate to get out of this one alive because, like I said, they were killing them in the first half. And I will give credit where credit is due. Bama absolutely took advantage of Georgia in the first half, made them pay for it, and glad that they did, because if they get 1 point shorter than that, they're in trouble in the first half. but you got to keep the intensity up in these big matchups. You're not playing UL Monroe or App State or these teams. No disrespect to App State, but you have to, you're playing Georgia, the team you're most likely going to have to deal with in either the playoff or the SEC championship. You just had to keep that intensity up. And that was one thing I just in general from the game I took away from it was, I don't know how you let them back into that game when you're up by that much. You've killed their will and you just were standing there flat-footed for the first 30 minutes you were killing them. And up until the last 5 minutes, you were pretty much just a spectator. And and going forward now, Bama is going to have to make sure that doesn't happen again. Because I guarantee you, if they play that again, Georgia wins that game. Just straight up. If Bama does not adjust and Bama doesn't just keep the pedal to the metal, because you cannot let these teams, you cannot let a team like Georgia have any life, any momentum, and they almost pay the price for giving them any a chance there.
Yeah, I mean, I think DeBoer will obviously learn from this. And, this was his first real test at Bama, and he passed. Regardless of how they got there, he still won the game, and that's the important part. So now the rest of the season for them, it's not that crazy difficult. They have a Vanderbilt game, which will be tough, but actually, no, the schedule is pretty tough because they've got Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn. Those are tough games outside the Auburn game, really. But even if they lose a game or two, this Alabama team is almost assuredly going to the playoff. So there's, like you said, there's likely a rematch with Georgia at some point if it's in the SEC championship game or in the playoff. So we'll see it again, and I want to see it again. I would like to see these two teams play again, and that honestly is great about the fact of the new SEC schedules, because now Alabama and Georgia will play each other 2 times every 4 years, so we'll get to see them more often than not. Okay, let's move on to Illinois, Penn State. Really close game. Altemeyer had a decent game. I think Drew Allar is just, again, mediocre. Like I keep saying, I'm not impressed with this guy. It was a 1-score game late, and then Penn State gets a late score to put them over. It's just, it's a struggle because, Illinois now loses this game, and I feel bad for them because they definitely I don't know, they're definitely a really good team, and it's just one loss, but it still sucks because it's going forward in the Big Ten, it's going to be difficult for them to try to get into the Big Ten championship game. They have an outside chance of getting into the playoff, but their schedule gets tougher. They play Michigan, Oregon, and just really those 2 games. But if they get another loss or 2, they'll probably be out of the playoff mix. But great game by them. They were in it the entire way. They played good defensively, and I think that really is what stands out the most for me for them. They kept Penn State in check outside of Katron Allen for Penn State. But yeah, hats off to Illinois, playing really strong here, and we'll see what happens with them. But Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, at least on this one, this is where Penn State's defense got their meal ticket from, because holding Illinois, and I know Illinois isn't like a juggernaut on offense, but they were able to hold them to under 250 yards, and they were able to force those 2 turnovers, and that was the deciding factor. Because yes, this game was really close, and it was a typical Big Ten, slugfest. Emphasis on slug there. where they had to, just get down and dirty with each other. And the rushing game for Penn State is ultimately won out. I know Allen had over 100 yards and a touchdown, and Alar was serviceable. It's a guy you can't really have him go deep with, but they were at least able to get enough, high percentage pass plays for him. But again, Penn State's defense was the real MVP of this game, and they were able to come in and get a pretty messy win.
Okay, last two games real quick. Arizona, Utah. This game, actually was pretty close, even though the score says 23-10. Utah had an opportunity late, but Zach Wilson's brother, Isaac, throws a late pick. And, this team, I still have high hopes for Utah because I think Cam Rising will come back at some point. But Fafita looked great, man. Fafita just, he had a huge throw to get them down the field in that last drive. And then he had a huge touchdown throw to put them up 23-10. And just Fafita didn't have like the greatest game numbers wise, but he had those huge throws at the end. And, this Arizona team may surprise some people. They only have that one loss to K-State. So maybe we'll see a rematch in the Big 12 championship game. We'll see. But your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, for me, and I get Kentucky beating Ole Miss was big. This was my biggest upset of the day because the last time, not only Utah.
I was going to ask you this. I was ready to hear your stat.
They did lose to Oregon last year, and that was their first loss at home against a ranked team since I think 2018. The last time they lost to an unranked team as the home team and ranked was 2017 against Stanford.
Jeez.
So flash you back there. Jim McElwain was still the coach at Florida, and I was still in high school. Yeah. So it's been that long. So that for me, I was watching that game, and that was the upset of the day for me. And I get Kentucky beating Ole Miss was huge, but just from like an expectation standpoint, I couldn't believe Arizona did it. And that was no disrespect to Arizona. They have a really under the radar, dangerous team, especially with Fafita. That one pass he threw on the run to put him up 23-10 was thing of beauty. And Arizona is a team that people need to watch out for, especially teams, because they will look at Utah. They got bit and they were on the road. So now I think Arizona plays BYU. I know they got to play UCF at Orlando at some point. Yeah, but there is a road for them to the Big 12 championship.
For sure.
But all in all, just great win for Arizona. This was a huge statement win, and for Utah, it's not over, but it's a really, really tough loss because they were in this game, but they just couldn't, like you said, they couldn't make the big plays where Arizona did.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Last one, UCLA, Oregon. I mean, Oregon just like this game wasn't even close. This was blowout central, and UCLA got a pick six or a fumble return for a touchdown. Sorry. And that was it. It was the only score outside of the two field goals that they had. The offense was just non-existent. Garbers looked really bad. 118 yards, 2 TDs, just dreadful. And I don't know what's going to happen with this UCLA team, but it doesn't look good because they only have 1 win and 3 losses. And the schedule is still daunting the rest of the year. And I expected 7 wins, but now with Penn State on the road and Nebraska and USC and this Washington team could be dangerous. Just not a good look. Your thoughts before we finish it off?
Again, this is what I was saying with Oregon. This is the Oregon team I was expecting from the first few games of the year. You're better than the team you're playing. Show it. And they did. And they almost quadrupled UCLA in total offense. And it just comes down to Oregon had the better team, just straight up. Yeah. And that's what I was saying. That's what it was so frustrating when they were squeaking these games out. Yeah. Was we know Oregon's good. They should be, just prove it. Don't, give your fans heart attacks in Eugene. Just go out and beat the teams you're clearly better at. And they did that. They did that against Oregon State in the Civil War. So now they got to keep that momentum going. I know they play Michigan State next week, and that's a team they, outgun as well. So they just need to keep it rolling. Gabriel
Guess
had
what
a
the game is after that. It's the Ohio State game.
It is, yeah.
I'm actually really excited about that. I totally forgot that they're playing each other, and it's in Eugene. Dude, that's a huge game. Like, that's like monumental game right there.
Yeah. But all in all, Oregon, they showed up. They showed, they had the better team, better play calling, and they attacked them both passing and rushing. Gabriel had a good game. And like I said, this is the team we need to see for the rest of the year.
Okay. All right. That's it, everybody. That is the show. You can reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. I might have something coming up soon, especially with USC playing Penn State. You can follow us, like us, subscribe on YouTube, which is at Hater Radio, for X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. It is at hater_radio. For Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. Ian, what are your socials?
Yes, at YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, it's at G_Gator_G.
That's the show. We'll talk to you on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Have a good one. We'll see you then.